site of the orbital discovery, and the shuttle has cleared the tower. Discovery's core computers now have primary control of critical vehicle functions.
Well, welcome everyone to the movie review stream. My name is Emerick'S, film critic for filminquiry.com, bagogames.com, popthrill.com, twincitiesgeek.com, and movieswithmark.com. So in today's stream, we're going to be talking about 3 new films this week. Well, actually, 2 of them aren't new, and one was released a few weeks ago, but we're going to try to see what we can do about that. So we're going to be talking about Roland Emmerich's new disaster film, which is Moonfall. We're talking about the latest, the 4th Jackass film in the Jackass saga of Jackass Forever, and the 5th Scream film just called Scream. That's it. Just Scream. Just Scream, alright? Okay. So we might as well get to the big film this week, the one that everyone is looking forward to, Moonfall. Although it's probably going to be Jackass Forever, but we'll just assume that everyone's still big on Roland Emmerich disaster movies. Because I certainly am at this one. So, alright, let's start there for you. So, Roland Emmerich's Moonfall might just be Roland Emmerich's most dumb disaster movie ever made. And part of me kind of expects that. I mean, like, for one, it's Roland Emmerich, you know, the guy behind so many disaster movies like 2012 and Independence Day, and all of them have just been, like, brain dead, over the top, and ridiculous and absurd. And that's actually why I kind of like Moonfall. Moonfall is probably his most over-the-top, overblown, ridiculous of disaster movies ever made. So if you don't know the premise, it's a fairly simple premise. The moon is going to crash into the Earth. That's about the extent of the story I could reveal without going into much of the spoilers, but fairly ridiculous premise. And then, of course, you know, we got astronauts who got to go up there and save the world, you know, akin to Armageddon. So you've got your misfit trio of astronauts that are going to go up there. You've got Brian Harper, who's played by Patrick Wilson, who's a former disgraced NASA astronaut who witnessed an alien life form, some weird swarm of like nanotech machines that killed his partner. Nobody believes him, but he still holds out hope that he was right and that he didn't just imagine it. Another astronaut who we follow is Joe Fowler, who was actually with Brian when he encountered that alien, but she still works at NASA, unlike Brian, who was kicked out. But she's not as well regarded within NASA. They barely believe her. And then, of course, we have the runt of the litter. We have Casey Houseman, played by John Bradley, who's not really a scientist, but he'd like to be. He has weird conspiracy theories that the moon is not really a moon, but but what he calls a megastructure. And he will keep saying this term throughout the film, just in case you miss it, that he doesn't believe that the moon is a moon, but a megastructure. He'll keep saying it over and over and over again. So he's the first one to discover that, the moon is actually off its orbit, and it's going to be heading straight into the Earth. So all my conspiracy theories are real. So they all team up, and they gotta go find out what's going on with the moon. And that's the gist of the story, without revealing the wacky plot twist involving aliens and AI and and so much absurd stuff involving gravity and shoving nukes into the moon. It's all very over the top. Like I've said this in my review, but if you're the type of person who watches a Roland Emmerich film and you've got a bingo card where you're waiting for every single one of the tropes that happen with the disaster movie, that card's going to be filled. Every trope that you want is there. You have the crackpot conspiracist who's proven right. You have the disgraced astronaut. You have the kid who can't stay out of jail. You have the stepdad who sacrifices himself so that he can prove himself to his family. You have explosions. You have cities blowing up. You have big, grand scenes of space. You have chunks of debris flying everywhere. Everything that you'd expect in a Roland Emmerich film is here, and more, actually. Just because, I don't want to give away the plot twist, just because it is so ridiculous that I want you to experience this for yourself with just how over the top it is. But once it's actually revealed what's happening with the moon, it's told by a child. So when this exposition is delivered by a child, that feels very fitting, because it feels like a kid is coming up with this story as they go along, like saying, oh no, the moon isn't really a moon, but it's a megastructure, and it's got this history behind it, and there's this whole war and aliens and AI, and it's just, it's adorably ridiculous. For context, I think I watched this film probably the best way. I went to the IMAX screening, and I was actually sat next to a state university physics department who was invited to the screening. And the moment when the scientists started chiming in about, the moon and its path and, what it's going to do to the Earth, they immediately started cracking up. They were laughing harder than anyone in that theater. And it just mounted up further from there. Even if you don't quite get all the jokes that the physicists were picking up on, with the unintentional comedy, there's a lot of absurdity that you can pick up on immediately. Specifically, any dialogue that involves the moon. Anytime they mention the moon in any capacity, it made me crack up so much. There are scenes where oh crap, the moon is rising, because they see the moon coming up overhead like it's a monster that's gonna come kill them. There's other ridiculous sayings you're now a part of the moon now, when they actually reveal what's inside it. Oh god, what are some other great ones? The moon is gonna help us. They literally say that at one point. It's all just over the top. Just all the dialogue is so you can tell they're trying for comedy here and there. Especially with Casey Houseman, they want him to be this lovable dork who owns a cat called Fuzz Aldrin. And probably the one biggest groan you're going to get out of the film is when he starts praising SpaceX and Elon Musk. A lot. And it's it's only 2 instances, but you can hear the groans in the audience. Not just from the physicists, just from everyone around. But outside of that, the unintentional comedy, when it's not trying for laughs, it's so much fun. I was just I was just cracking up and just thrashing around in my seat, just trying to contain my laughter. I felt that same sensation when I watched Cats, and I could feel my brain melting as I was watching it, and just laughing at that point. And I think around the 1 hour mark is when I started just losing it. And I mean, and how could I not lose it? This is a film where I'm not kidding. The shuttle they fly up to the moon. It's an old shuttle, of course. They've got to unearth an old shuttle, and it's got graffiti on the side, and it says "fuck the moon." And then it dawned on me, they're flying into a hole inside the moon, so they're flying a shuttle that says "fuck the moon" straight into the moon's butthole. You can't make this up. This is so absurd, and I really love it on this angle, because let's face it, it's a Roland Emmerich film. It's a disaster movie. Like, disaster movies are not that much well known for, being fairly like intelligent or prestige or anything like that. They're big, they're dumb, they're loud. And this is definitely the biggest. It's got ridiculous sequences of like a spaceship taking off, like right as a tidal wave is about to envelop them. It's loud. It's got lots of explosions. It's got the Chrysler building like flying off into the distance and gravity sucking people off the ground and sucking up their oxygen. It's got a lot of the tropes you expect. You have Donald Sutherland show up as a character who's only in for one scene, and I don't remember the character's name, but take a wild guess. Based on the previous films you've seen with Donald Sutherland, take a wild guess what his role is going to be in this story. Because it's the same role that he's had in any disaster movie or sci-fi epic or anything like that. It's all the familiar tropes, and it's dumb. It is unbelievably laugh out loud, funny, dumb. And not like trying to, not in the way that it's dumb, like where it's trying hard for jokes and it's landing them, like, kind of like when it's like winking at the camera with stuff like The Meg, or stuff like Skyscraper, where you can feel it trying for jokes and they're not quite hitting. Here you can actually feel, like, at least for me, I could feel Emerick's earnestness, that the unintentional comedy just flew out of this thing. I loved it. The bizarre plot twists, the over-the-top special effects, everything about it is big and dumb. And aside from like a handful of scenes when it's trying for comedy, like I mentioned with the SpaceX and Elon Musk stuff where it doesn't really work, this is my favorite comedy of the year. That's not really intended to be a comedy, because it's hard, like, because a lot of people I know are going to criticize this film saying like, well, this film's stupid. Of course it's stupid. It's disaster movies. They've all been stupid. Every single one of them. The amount of disaster films you could find that actually have something, something more besides just like the spectacle of it all are very few. And I am not expecting Roland Emmerich to, at this point in his career, pull out something any different than that. All I'm expecting at this point is just big, dumb, disaster sci-fi epics. And he delivers on that. He gives us like the biggest of spectacles, like, cities being demolished. He gives us all the familiar tropes that are punched up to 11. He gives us all the absurdity that makes, like, it will make physicists and non-physicists alike just laugh out loud. Like, they were, and I could hear it throughout the entire auditorium. Everyone just cracking up at this thing. I rarely like using this term, but it's a film that is so bad that it's good. That it becomes so over the top, so absurd, so utterly ridiculous that I couldn't help but love it. I would love to see this film again with a crowd. Like, this is like the only way to see it, is to see it with a bunch of people and embrace the ridiculousness of the whole situation. So Moonfall pretty much delivered on everything I wanted and more. So yeah, that was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed that. It's weird to say that, like, I laughed at that more than I did at Jackass Forever, which is true, Now that Jackass Forever is bad, I mean, I'll get to that here in a moment. But I knew I wanted to get to Moonfall first, because if I don't get to that one, I'm going to run out of breath. And I have to stress how much I love it. It is like Emerick's. I'd say Emerick's back, but it's kind of what Emerick always does, isn't it? At least he amps up the dumb nature, the ridiculousness, the absurd science. Doesn't try to pull it back. He knows what you came for. Okay, so I'm gonna get to Jackass Forever here. I'm gonna pull up my notes on this, because the notes that I have for Jackass Forever are just. It's interesting taking notes for these types of films, because all you can really do is just write down all the gags. Is write down everything that they do in the film and then just decide whether or not they're funny. Okay, let's see. Get all my notes up here. Okay. So, here we go. So, Jackass Forever is the fourth Jackass film. And, yeah, these films have been, the whole Jackass franchise has been going on for well over 2 decades. And the crew, the people behind Jackass, they know this. They know they're getting older. They know they're getting some wrinkles. And they know that eventually they're going to start repeating themselves. In fact, that's actually kind of a big part of this fourth Jackass film, is that they actually go back to some of their older bits and try to and basically just try to like rework them and try to find ways to make them funnier. Like, you might remember one of their oldest bits was called the cup test, which was essentially a test to see how well a protective cup would protect your genitals from a punch. So they comment on this when they start up this bit, saying like, isn't it funny how many years later we're still doing the same stupid shit? And it's like, well, yeah, at least they are being a little bit more innovative. Instead of just having, just someone on the crew punch them where the cup is, this time they get a heavyweight boxer to punch them. They get a professional softball player to throw a softball at it. They get a professional hockey player to throw a hockey puck at it. And they throw in a, pogo stick just for good measure. So at least they are very innovative. I can say that. For the many familiar Jackass people who once more assemble for this film, they do find ways to take these old bits and try to make them more interesting, more complex, and basically just try to find new stuff to do with it. Where even though when it feels like they've run out of ideas, they're trying to improve on stuff they've done before. A particular example of this might be they at one point decide that they want to light a fart underwater to see if that would be possible. And surprisingly enough, they actually bring someone in who could help them make this happen. So the technology has improved where they can do these more elaborate stunts. Of course, basically, to say that, Jackass Forever, like, a lot of people will probably criticize it. If you're new to the Jackass films, yes, it's just like the other films. It's a whole series of, like, stunts and behind-the-scene pranks and gags and jokes. All the same stuff you've seen before. And on that level, you can really only gauge the film either with how much it made you laugh or how much it made you not laugh. And I can safely say that this film actually did make me smile a lot and did make me laugh a few times. On that level, I kind of got to say that this is probably the weakest of the Jackass films, just because I think they've gone so over the top in so many years and tried to outdo themselves so many times that you almost expect nothing less from them. Like the gags they do involving having spiders, get on their faces and scorpions sting them on the lips. Okay, I've seen that, kind of par for the course. Not bad. Scenes where they're having Steve-O has a bit where he's got a whole bunch of bees who swarm around his penis. Not bad. That's it's shocking, and they get a lot of the close-ups so they can show you a lot of the genitals. I will say this: they are not afraid to get nude in the Jackass movies, and they probably spend the most time nude in this film more than any other. Specifically, the opening number is actually very creative. They try to stage a kaiju movie with one of their penises. Now, I'm going to try to hold back on just describing every single one of the bits that happened here, because at that point, I'm not going to go through segment by segment and review each little skit, like which one made me laugh and which one made me didn't. I will say that the consistency of the bits did keep a constant smile on my face, where even though I could see where the bits were going, I could see the gags that they're trying here, I could even see some of the familiar staging that they're putting in this film. In fact, the film doesn't even try to hide this too. Like, when you get to the end of the film, they actually do a side-by-side comparison to see how much they've improved or not improved over the years. A perfect example of this is, you might remember, I believe in Jackass 3 or 2, I think it might have been 3, there was a bit where Johnny Knoxville gets hit by a bull. And in Jackass Forever, we get another scene where Johnny gets hit by a bull. Except this time, he kind of stays on the ground a little bit more and has a broken rib and ends up going to the hospital. So I guess it shows how much they've aged. The good news is that if you're still hoping for more of these Jackass movies, they actually have brought in some new blood. There's a few new characters they bring into the mix. One of them is called Poopies, which, okay, own that name. And they actually bring a woman into the group as well. Rachel Wolfson, and I gotta admit, like the one, she's in a few segments, but like the one segment that I think where she owns is a segment called Scorpion Botox, which is kind of self-explanatory. But I think, like, Jackass has prepared this new wave of I'm not even sure, I want to say like jackasses or something like that, to prepare them for all these stunts. Like they are willing to jump into these many bits, I think, because Jackass has prepared them for it. Like the whole like Scorpion Botox thing, Wolfson takes it like a champ. Like she willingly puts her face up, like let's get the scorpion stinger on my face. And when it doesn't look like they've got a good enough shot, she's like, do it again. She's a trooper. That they all are kind of troopers in this. With everything from like the human surfboard to there's a lot of like human stuff. They do the human surfboard. They have like the human ramp where a whole bunch of people form a ramp and they skateboard off them. A lot of those bits the new people fill in for. While still having, a few bits for like Johnny Knoxville and Steve-O to still prove that they can still tumble around in porta potties. I really do like the one bit where Johnny Knoxville gets shot out of a cannon, trying to do like the story of Icarus with like the wings and flying up into the sky. Beautiful little bits like that in between, the scenes of them, having bears paw at their junk and turning their penises into paddle balls. I'm trying not to describe all the bits. I'm trying not to. Because I mean, what more can you say? I mean, you can really only judge these films on whether or not they shock and make you laugh, and they still kind of have it. Just by a bit. Like there's a few segments where just like, okay, I see what's going on here, but I've kind of seen you guys do this before, so it's like, and it's like I'm not like annoyed or bored with it, but I'm just kind of like, okay, I know, like, this is like a greatest hits for you guys, like, pun intended. And I know that you're getting older, so I know this more or less just, yeah, kind of feels like a greatest hits movie, with some new segments in between. They do get some nice guest stars here and there. They get Tyler, the Creator, for a great sequence where he plays the piano and gets electrocuted. You have Eric Andre stop by for a little bit, where I believe he gets punched either in the face or in the nuts when he's trying to get a coffee. You have Machine Gun Kelly getting smacked by a giant hand. Decent bits like that. That's all kind of like par for the course stuff. There's nothing really all that shocking with the guests. But yeah, like all I can really judge it on is like how much I laughed, and I had a laugh here and there. Not as many as I did in like the other Jackass films, which did find a way to shock and surprise at every turn. Classic example of that, like I'll never forget the scene in Jackass 2 where they have a miniature of a bathroom, but it's so good you don't know it's a miniature until the first large drop of feces comes into the screen and shocks you. That's some good subversion. There's a few bits like that here and there where, like, someone smacks into a background Looney Tunes style, or you mistake a punching bag for another part of the body for a scene. So yeah, it still has some surprises here and there. It is showing its age. At least there's a new troupe to take over once the Jackass people get, they pretty much are getting pretty long in the tooth. In fact, in the case of Steve-O, he's actually lost a tooth. And on that level, yeah, I do appreciate the film, but yeah, it really is showing its age, and this is definitely one of the weaker Jackass films. That being said, it's, if you're a fan of these movies, I would say you won't be disappointed. It delivers on pretty much everything you expect from Jackass, with all the guest stars, the big opening sequence, the many pranks that involve getting hit in the crotch, the many gags that go on in between scenes, and the stuff they leave on the cutting room floor that somehow finds its way into the film. All that stuff is in there, and I still adore it. But yeah, this is definitely the Jackass film that is showing its age. So still a fun film, but I'm not sure how much momentum can keep going with the Jackass movies. So, good film. Good film. Not great. Because if I'm being really honest here, if I'm being very honest, I have to. Moonfall made me laugh a lot more than Jackass Forever. I'm sorry. I know Jackass was trying. It was really trying, but Moonfall surprised me. What can I tell you? All right, get a little drink here. All right, and prepare for the final film of the review stream. Scream. Not Scream, the first film, not the Scream, the fourth film, but Scream, the fifth film. Yeah, Scream 5. Let me get out all my notes here. Okay. So this should be a little bit of an interesting review. Okay, so here we go. So Scream. Well, Scream 5. Okay, it's the fifth Scream film. And you might be asking yourself, well, why do they do that with sequels? Why do they always try to hide the number as though they're ashamed, that they're making like another entry in this saga? Why do they always got to hide the numbers? Why can't they just say Scream 5? And if you make this comment, the thing you should know about Scream is that it tries to parody its audience very very astutely, that they know you're going to make this joke. They know the comments that are going to come with this. And that's one of the elements that I've always kind of loved about Scream, but it's also been one of the most frustrating things. Like, Scream has always been not quite like a deconstruction, but more of like a love letter to slasher horror. So like basically Wes Craven kind of seemed like he was trying to like end slasher films by having a very almost kind of like postmodern take on slasher films, where teenagers would be aware of slasher films and somewhat aware that they're inside a slasher film, and yet still make all the same mistakes. Like there's something quite sobering about that, to have a film where, there's someone who's watching a horror film who's basically going to say like, oh, I want to do that in that situation. And then of course, if you were in that situation, the terror would overtake you and you wouldn't be able to react that way. And you'd probably end up making some mistake if you're that terrified of a situation. And that much I do like about Scream. I like when it calls out stuff like that. It is, though, a little bit, aggravating at times, though, when they do this, when they're trying to do like parody and kind of like tiptoe around satire, like trying to like mock slasher convention while still trying to be a slasher film. So it's trying to be a love letter, and the fifth film is very much trying to be that while also still trying to be topical. But then it kind of raises the question about, like, how long can you go with that bit? Because, like, the way that the fifth Scream film starts off, it starts off the same way that the first Scream film started off. You know the bit. We're in Westboro, quiet suburb. Girl is home alone at night. The phone rings. She picks it up. It's a creepy guy in there who wants to play a game about horror movies. So it's basically, and pretty much throughout the film, it's mostly just repeating the same pattern of Scream, but trying to like bring in a bit more modern sensibilities to it. So like with the opening scene, the killer says that he wants to talk about horror movies, but the young person, of course, a young person this day and age, is going to be more into basically highbrow horror. She lists stuff like It Follows and The Babadook. Stuff that's, considered a little bit more prestige horror. Not quite prestige. More like thematic horror, as opposed, basically not slasher horror. Basically not slasher films. We don't have as many slasher films in the mainstream. We get a few here and there, and they kind of seem like they're making a comeback a little bit, just because horror's always been like a constant. It's just kind of like evolved over time. But basically, the killer really loves slasher movies, and he really wants them to come back. And on this level, I kind of like the direction that Scream takes, because without giving too much away here, the ultimate reveal is that toxic fandom is the real killer here. It's a bunch of like fans who don't like the way that what do you want to say here? The in-universe movie of Stab has lost its way because it was based on the murders from like the first Scream film. So in order to get it back to what the films used to be, they basically try to stage a new like classic slasher killing so that the films can return to the way they once were. So basically, toxic fandom in a nutshell. That's a decent route to take, and hopefully I haven't spoiled too much of where the film goes in that direction. But at the same time, like, the film almost becomes like annoying with how much winking it does at that. Like, you would think that at some point in the film, I was hoping that it could take off, that it could stop just being meta and take off with its own story. Because, I mean, yeah, like, the story itself is going through, like, the same, you know, like, the same motions as the last film. You have the central character of Sam Carpenter, played by Melissa Barrera, and she's basically the new Sydney. She's a woman who, she has a dark past. She'd rather not talk about it, but she's got to unearth her past in order to, you know, face her demons and stop this new killer. But also, we have the original Sydney. She's back as well, once again played by Neve Campbell. And I gotta say, for as much like parody as the Scream film does at you know, horror movie tropes, it still commits to a lot of annoying ones. Like, we have a lot of characters who return here. Like, we have David Arquette show up as Dewey again. We have Courtney Cox back as Gail Weathers. She's a reporter now. Dewey has since retired as a sheriff and is now basically a drunk. But anytime we get these reveals of these characters who kind of hang back, like they're kind of in like a soft sequel type of way where they're kind of like torch passers. But anytime that they show up, they do like the typical thing they do when they want to reveal the character. You know, they have like their backs to the camera, they push in, they turn to the camera, the music swells, and there's a hold for the applause, expecting like the fans will clap once they see Neve Campbell back on screen. And it's like, yes, they got her back for another Scream movie. Okay. And basically, like, there's a whole lot of like meta commentary on, like, you know, how fans don't like when horror franchises go in a particular direction, when they have too many new characters, not enough old characters, when they have, you know, a new plot, but not a plot that's too new, that it's going to scare older fans. So basically, there's this waffling Goldilocks zone that they want to find for horror films, and more importantly, for this Scream film, that it becomes annoying after a while. Like, you would think by the third act, they would have enough guts to just go with the slasher story and like actually make a slasher film where they're not just commenting on the third act or like getting a good kill or here's the final sequence. It's like, okay, yes, you've run through all this. We've had like, you know, our new troop of teens, our horror victims / suspects. They've given us all the info. They've made all the commentary. They've listed off all the horror slasher rules that they went through in the first film. They do that again here, but again, like, you know, it's just like a reiterance, and it's mostly just like more of the same, and it kind of sucks because thematically there's a lot of interesting stuff I think to explore with this Scream film, that when it's not trying too hard to be meta, it's actually pretty interesting. That by the third act, for as annoying as it tries to be with trying to like cite all these horror tropes and franchise tropes, it still manages to be like an interesting reveal. Not so much with like the characters they reveal who are the killers, but more with like the focus on like the motivations and the drive for why they're trying to kill. Like, I mean, it can honestly be anyone, and you could just attach this motivation of like toxic fandom to them, which I gotta admit is a good assembly for this type of film. And another thing I gotta give credit to is the kills. Of course, like, you know, if you got a slasher film, you've got to have good kills. They gotta look good, and there are surprisingly a lot of great kills, even though most of the time you're just watching Ghostface, you know, gut someone with a knife. He at least finds clever ways to do it. Like, he guts them in like the chest and the back at one point. There's one of the best kills in the film is when he stabs someone through the cheek and like slowly gets it like through the backside of the cheek there. Just great, gory, bloody stuff. That you'd want to see it in a slasher film. So in that aspect of trying to be a love letter, it still has that touch. It's just when it keeps trying to be meta. It's like, yes, I know you understand horror movies. I get it. I understand that you're trying to pay tribute to Wes Craven being knowing enough of the slasher genre. But the thing is, a lot of people are very much up on the slasher genre as well. Like, even like I gotta admit, I really love the way that they pose the teenagers in this film as being incredibly astute on both fandoms and horror movie logic, and also some of like the classic and modern horror films. Like, it was surprising to see like a slasher film with a lot of smarts with the characters. I wish I could say the same for the acting. Like, not all the actors are that great. There's a few scenes where characters are meant to just spout out meta commentary and exposition, and it just doesn't land. But to be fair, I don't think most actors could make some of these land, let alone these young actors who we got on screen here. So I'll give them the benefit of the doubt. They are doing the best that they can with this material. And I was a little bit on the fence, but I think ultimately I can give like this film a little bit of like a mild recommendation, just because I do like thematically what it says by the end of the film. Annoyances and all. So like, I was constantly annoyed by the film, but even with all these things working against it, as a slasher film and as a film that wants to comment on the current state of horror, it actually does a pretty good job. I just wish it could have like its cake and eat it too, by also having like, just a little bit of like some better dialogue, a little bit more embracing of the slasher genre that it's trying to pay tribute towards. And also just a little bit more faith in itself to have tension. Like, that's one of the things that I think the meta commentary robs. Is like when you're constantly pointing out all these horror tropes and how they fit together and how the story is going to end and where it's going to end, you're kind of removing the tension from it all. It's like, yes, we as an audience are astute enough that we see this and it's coming and we get it, and I kind of appreciate the commentary on it. But you could at least have a little bit more faith to just show some tension in there, So yeah, it's the Scream films are definitely showing their age, but at least they find something decent to latch on to in this fifth film. And who knows, they might find something great to latch onto in the sixth film, but I don't know. There's only so many times that you can just point out these horror tropes and keep and keep paying tribute to them before it just becomes like an annoying roast more than anything. So yeah, it's not a bad film. Not a bit. I would say definitely, much like the Jackass films, if you love what Scream does, if you love its commentary, if you love what it has to say about horror movies, the film will give you everything you want with it. That's the problem. It doesn't really give you more than that, So I was hoping for more. Yeah. Yes, I was trying not to call her out so much, but yes, Samantha's character was really not that good. And I think you're right. Sucked. The problem with Samantha is that she has a lot of exposition. Her worst scene, and I think you'll agree with me on this point, the worst scene for her is when she's in the hospital and she has to deliver all this backstory about her family being basically being like killers and having this dark history. She has to unload all of this exposition, and she has to make it heartfelt, and she has to like break down in tears, and I don't think she can quite do that, because that's a lot to juggle. You have to unload all of this dialogue in this long scene and burst into tears by the end of it. That takes a lot of effort to actually sell that, and I don't think that the actor could have done that. But like I said, to be fair, I don't think most actors could have landed that as well either. So. And yeah, like it's tongue in cheek, and I try not to like to rag on the film for that, because that's kind of what Scream does. It's like if I were to just complain the whole time that Scream is the film that points out horror tropes, it's like, well yeah, it's always done that. It's like complaining about the Jackass films. It's like like the Jackass films is just nothing but a series of stunts and gags and getting hit in the nuts. It's like, yeah, it's been that way for the last three films. You kind of expect that with sequels. which is why I'm glad that like Moonfall wasn't just more of the same. It was more absurdity, more stupidity, more of that Emmerich earnest ridiculousness that I love so much. So yeah, like I believe they said they're gonna do Scream 6. I'm not sure. I'm not sure what you could focus on. Like, I guess they could keep going with toxic fandom. I guess they could keep going down that hole. I'm not sure how much deeper they could go, or if they could go that much deeper. But it'd be interesting. It's odd that when she hears her sister get stabbed, and in the next scene, she's talking about movies. Yeah, it's I almost kind of wish there was more of that knowing nature about how to respond to situations, because it feels like there's a lot of missed opportunities for ragging on horror movie tropes that it could be like more actively parodying. Because like, yeah, like that's kind of like part of like the whole like slasher genre and murder mysteries, is that usually when a character dies, there's this like weird calmness or this like giddiness where characters aren't that concerned with the situation. But particularly like I mean, like I could call out Scream, the original film, for doing that, but you kind of sense that they were trying to mock that as well. I mean, like they did call it out a little bit in the first film, obviously, but that is common, like with both just slasher films and murder mystery films as well, where you know, like a kill or a death will take place. There's a murderer on the loose, and everyone will just act like everything's fine. It's cool. Just remain calm. Nothing's wrong. Kind of probably gonna make a Stephen Kirby for Scream 4 and Scream 6 to focus on mainly. Yeah, like because they, who did they brought back? What's her name? Like Hicks from the. Am I getting her name right there? Yeah, Judy Hicks from the fourth film. She did return, although she's probably not going to return for the next film. You know what I think they should do? I think for Scream 6, I think they should make a prequel film. I think they should just go full retro. Go full retro and have like a retro slasher film where you have a bunch of kids who barely know any of the slasher tropes and are just going off of like, you know, like Hammer horror films and the classic Frankenstein films. I say that only just because I think there'd be a really funny scene there where you could play off that scene of explaining horror movie logic, but have it through like classic Universal monster movie logic. Just little renditions like that. Because like the scene where they do the whole explaining horror trope rules in Scream 5, it's just a reiterance. Like they don't really play off it much. There's not a whole lot they do with it. It's just like, okay, I see. Same scene, same mistakes before. I mean, perhaps that's like the real big message. Not toxic fandom in Scream 5. It's that time is a flat pancake. That it's circular. The dopey teens don't learn. You're trapped in a slasher movie, and this is the role you play. I guess if you want to go like Cabin in the Woods, go like full crazy with it. The difference though is that the other Scream movies, no one is related to the person in the first kill. That's true, yeah. Pico would be cool, or hella meta, and have the actors of the Scream Ghostface killer at a horror con. Yeah, I mean, heck, if you know, if you want to pay tribute to Wes Craven, go full new Nightmare on it, the same way they did with Nightmare on Elm Street. That'd be wild. I would love to see that. I mean, even if it was just a reiterance of Wes Craven's New Nightmare, and just you know, just the same plot, but with just like modern horror commentary on it, that would still be really cool. I'd love that. Because we're at a point now where we actually do have like a whole brand new genre of like, you know, like peak what do you want to call it? Like, I don't like want to say like avant-garde, but like kind of like peak thematic horror that you could totally rag on, which they kind of do in Scream 5 for a little bit, but but just enough so like the killers aren't fully revealed. So so yeah, I have hopes that they could do something good with the next Scream film. Maybe. We'll see. Oh boy. So I got like a little bit of a you do a little bit of a recommendation here. Yeah, I'll put some music on the background there, just to set the mood a little bit. So it's been a while. I haven't done a lot of these like live streams in a little bit. And there is usually like a lot of stuff that I don't get around to like covering. Like I obviously didn't get to a lot of the big Christmas movies. I did actually get around to. I got Well Go USA to send me this little film, Escape from Mogadishu, which I was actually surprised. I was expecting this to be like, because it's based on political events from the 1990s. I was expecting it to be a little bit like jingoistic. And thankfully it's not. It's a pretty thrilling film about South Koreans and North Koreans trying to get out of Mogadishu during the uprising of 1991, and they drive around with books and sandbags on their cars to protect them from gunfire. And pretty expertly shot scenes here. It's not too bad. They called it one of the best action films of the summer, and I think it was briefly in theaters last summer. Like, we always get like some Korean and Indian films that slip under the radar, and I don't get around to them. But I am glad that I caught up on this one. This is actually a pretty good film to check out. And then there's like a whole bunch of like small films that I'm just starting to get into. Like I just watched the new Pedro Almodovar film, Parallel Mothers. It's still really good. Pedro is definitely one of like the best living directors we have today. Everything he directs, he knocks out of the park. You might remember a few years ago he did Pain and Glory, which was amazing. Antonio Banderas rocked in that film, and Penelope Cruz rocks in this film just as much. Especially like for Parallel Mothers, for those who've never seen it, it's a story about two single women who have babies. They have them in a hospital. The babies get mixed up, and they reconnect and form a romantic relationship after that. Sounds like a comedy. Could be a comedy, but it's actually a pretty heartfelt drama of tragedy and legacy that Almodovar does so well. Like basically, if you've seen like Pain and Glory, it's kind of more that deep contemplation on family and legacy that he does so well in his twilight years. I have not seen Licorice Pizza yet. I gotta get around to that. I'm gonna try to. There's a huge backlog of stuff. Like, I'm just getting around to, like, some of the last-minute award stuff. Like, Licorice Pizza is definitely on my list. Next one on that is going to be, like, I just got around to seeing Jockey. Drive My Car, I believe, is coming. I believe that might actually be on digital right now, if it's not. I know that the Worst Woman in the World is... I believe that just went digital today as well. That was a big holdover that I know a lot of people are talking about. I do want to check on Licorice Pizza, though, just because, you know, PTA, gotta watch it. There's a whole big backlog. I'm catching up, though. And I'm sure it's great. PTA rarely disappoints. I've actually, like, I know a lot of people really didn't like, was it Inherent Vice? That film has actually really grown on me. I actually really dig it now. And Drive My Car does look really good. I definitely want to check that out. I was so pissed when I went to like the festival website, and I hate when they do the city by city, because usually it means that Minnesota gets knocked off the list and we don't get it. And yeah. That's always been kind of like frustrating, like, because to have like, you know, awards, films that are obviously going to be pushed for awards, and like we can't get around to seeing them because like festivals and stuff like that. And I've actually managed to get a lot of like the big ones that I thought would be released, you know, like slowly around this time. Like Tragedy of Macbeth just came out 2 weeks ago, and I saw that way back in November. But yeah, we haven't really got much screenings for like Drive My Car and Worst Woman in the World. But I'm gonna catch up on them. I'm gonna try it again. What was the other thing I watched? I watched Jockey. Jockey was really good. And a preview for next week. I have seen Death on the Nile. I will be reviewing that next week, although it is under a review embargo, I believe, for Monday. I believe it is. It's under review embargo right now, so I can't talk about it, but I did see it last night, so it's fresh in my memory. And yeah, Inherent Vice is like, if you're willing to go along with this kind of like stream of basically, if you treat it like a Hunter S. Thompson type story, it really works. It's great if you just go with the flow with it. You know? Jockey? Jockey is a film about an aged jockey who realizes that he has an estranged son, and he tries to connect with his son who wants to get into riding horses. So it's part sports training film and like one of those like, you know, like coming of age sports training films, and part like cerebral drama about contemplating legacy and life, where like this aged jockey like really does want to just get in one more race before he dies, just one more, just because everything will melt away. It's very slow paced, but it's very beautiful, very very expertly acted. There's like, it's very sparse on dialogue. And it moves at its own pace. It's very good. It's a very very much a sleeper film. That I think few people are probably going to see it. It's very very small. It just released, I believe, last weekend, and I think it's still playing in a few places. Yeah, it's a very very slow paced, very very wonderful little Americana film. That's worth checking out. I really dug it. Who's it by? I think like I know like it has Clifton Collins Jr., who's amazing in it. Completely natural. It's directed by Clint Bentley, who I don't believe has done too much. Let me see. Is this... Oh wow, yeah, this is actually his directorial debut. He's done like 3 short films, but yeah, other than that. And damn, I always like with Aronofsky with Pig. I love when directorial debuts are just amazing, because you're witnessing the start of hopefully a filmmaker who's gonna go far. And I hope Bentley does. Bentley seems like the type of guy, based on Jockey, who could do these these like Clint Eastwood style like Twilight Years films that I think would work really well. Because like honestly, you could show this film to someone and just tell them that it was directed by Clint Eastwood, and they'd believe it. I mean, they might be like watching it, like waiting for that one like gruff moment, or that one like politically incorrect moment you expect Eastwood to put in there. But other than that, yeah, it's an immaculately looking film. It has great little great country atmosphere. Yeah. Yeah. Hopefully it's tough because like they release it in January, which is usually crowded out by like, you know, the bigger films, like the stuff we've talked about, like Moonfall, Jackass, but also like a lot of the awards films that are coming out. When did it Oh, well, that explains it. I'm sorry, I haven't been as up on like Sundance. This did actually hit at Sundance. What? Did it? Wait a minute, what? Oh, I'm sorry. Sundance last year. That's what it was, yeah. I was going to say, like, it said, like, it premiered at Sundance, But I'm like, I'm pretty sure I watched this before it went to Sundance. It was Sundance last year, not this year. Okay. P.S. Did you get the Once Upon a Time in Hollywood reference in Scream? Yep. Yeah. There's every like all that, and like in addition to like all the other like blatant references that they make to the like was it like Ghostbusters and Star Wars. They mentioned, what did they call them, requels? I don't like that term. I don't care that the film calls them that. I'll go with soft sequels or reboots or whatever. I'm not gonna go with your terminology. That ain't happening. Oh my goodness. Yeah, it's been like I watched Scream, like what was that, like, God, that must have been like, that was at least like a month ago I saw that. Because I believe that came out pretty early this year. But yeah, it's been a fast week here too. Like just this week I did see Moonfall and Jackass, and Death on the Nile will be next week. So I guess yeah, that's about all I got for this stream. So I'll be streaming next week with reviews of Death of the Nile, and I'll try to do like a more proper review of Jockey, because I think that might be a good idea to cover that, and maybe Parallel Mothers as well. So we'll cover all that next week. If you want to read some of the reviews, I've actually done written reviews of all the films that we talked about here. They're up on movieswithmark.com. You can also check my reviews on TwinCitiesGeek.com, FilmInquiry.com, BagelGames.com, PopThrill.com, and I believe that's all of them. I'm pretty sure that's all of them. I write too many places. All right. Well, yeah, so thanks for stopping by, and yeah, I will I will catch you all next time. Ooh. And I'll definitely get more water next time, because I knew that my throat was gonna go out while I was doing like Moonfall, so I made sure I was gonna do Moonfall first, so I wouldn't run out of energy. So I'll see y'all next time.